short PowerPoint on advertising. I don't know if you want that or not. If you do, if you will make me a co-host, I can share my screen.
Sure will. Absolutely. Tina's jumping on for Matt, for Raleigh. Jessica and Mike and Carrie. So Janet, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to go ahead and get started out of respect for your time. So our office, we're Lantern Realty and Development. We're just a little old small firm down in the Charlotte region. We've got 8 offices across North Carolina. And one of the discussions that came up recently with our BICs was around advertising. And as you can imagine, that has evolved dramatically. So we're trying to figure out what we should be doing as far as guidance on advertising and how do we keep what we have, what do we keep, what do we, how do we keep all the advertisements from TikTok and Instagram and all those wonderful social media apps. So, and I think I made you a host as well. So that's a little bit of introduction for us. I'm one of the co-owners. Paula Sievert is here with me in my office. She doesn't want to be on camera for some reason. Most of our brokers in charge are here, and then Melissa Jacqueline is our compliance officer, I guess you would call her, is here as well. So that's an introduction for us. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Great, thanks. And thank you all for having me here today. I'm going to try to share my screen. Is that working? Can you see?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I can never tell if it's actually working or not. Great. Okay, so I thought I would talk for a little while about advertising. I know you guys might have some questions about other things that are not related to advertising. So we'll leave a little time at the end there for that. But I know advertising is a big deal, and there are lots of things to think about when you are thinking about advertising, and especially when you are the BIC of a firm and having to worry about all of your brokers who are advertising all over the place on various social media and other areas. So let's get into it, right? Okay, so the first thing I will do is kind of just run over the license law, and then we'll talk about the commission rules that relate to advertising. And the first thing is, of course, the law, which allows the commission to discipline a broker for a variety of different things. And advertising certainly is in that, that basket. So the first thing is what we call a 93A6A1 violation, which is for making willful or negligent misrepresentations in an advertisement. And that is something that the commission is really looking at, particularly right now, and with this board in a much stricter manner than they have in the past. You all know what material facts are, and I'll just give you the general rundown on it. Really, it's whatever might be important to a buyer in a transaction. If it is something like a fact about the property, like a structural defect or mechanical system flaws, or something related, a fact directly related to the property, like pending zoning changes, pending highway construction in the immediate area, or a fact relating to the ability of the principal, your buyer or your seller client, to complete the transaction, like whether or not they're going into bankruptcy or now they're getting a divorce and they can't purchase the property. Something along those lines would fall into their ability to complete the transaction. So it doesn't really matter what party in the transaction that you're representing. if you have material facts about the property that you're disclosing, or you need to disclose, or you should know about and disclose, you have to disclose them to all of the parties in the transaction. All of those material facts have to be disclosed. It can be a willful misrepresentation if you know something and do not disclose it, or you should have known it. That may be more of a negligent misrepresentation. But if you know about something, or you choose not to know, I've got brokers who say the buyer sent me the first buyer sent me their inspection report, and I didn't open it because I didn't want to look at it. You're choosing to not know the information that's in that report at that point in time. So the commission is looking at that as a violation. If it's in your hands, you should be looking at it and considering what information is in there about the particular property in question. The other law that is involved, or that we often charge brokers with, is 93A6A3, which is making the misrepresentation, but also doing it through advertising. And that happens when you make a misrepresentation about square footage, or about the number of bedrooms, and it's on a septic system that supports less bedrooms than you're advertising. I had somebody advertise a house as having a pool, and it didn't have a pool. Now, I think what they did was switch up to listing sheets when they were inputting. Clearly, that's a misrepresentation, but it's also something that someone looking at the property would know and see. So I look at that a little bit differently than I do when it's something that a broker couldn't, or a buyer couldn't notice if they went to the property and looked at the property. Hopefully the buyers are all looking at properties, because it makes me crazy when I hear that they're not, and just buying without sight unseen. We also look at 93A, 6A, 8, and 10, which are what I call our catch-all violations. These are, an A8 is unworthy or incompetent. So often if, a broker is repeatedly doing something incorrectly in advertising, we might charge them as being unworthy or incompetent. And then the A10 is for improper, fraudulent, or dishonest conduct. And that could be intentionally misrepresenting something, or it could be improper conduct just by being negligent. So those are the things that we charge brokers with under the license law when a case gets all the way to a hearing in front of the commission. Let me run over the rules really quick with you. The first rule is A105, and that is directly related to advertising. That rule states that a broker shall not advertise any brokerage service or the sale, purchase, exchange, rent, or lease of real estate for another or others without consent of the BIC, and without including in the advertisement the name of the firm or the sole proprietorship where the broker is affiliated. So you've got to have the firm's name, where the broker is affiliated, where they're advertising for, and you've got to have consent of the BIC. And these are things you should think about if you were looking at policies for your offices, making sure that your brokers are all complying with that. They're not advertising properties you don't know about, and that you don't have listings for, or they're not advertising in some manner that is inconsistent with these rules. Here is that advertising rule 105 that starts out with having consent of the BIC and having the name of the firm in the ad. That's got to be in the ad. The second part of the advertising rule is that a broker can't display a for sale or for rent sign without the written consent of the owner or the owner's agent. And that is what's given in your listing agreement. So you cannot advertise without having that listing agreement in place first, because that's what gives you the ability to put out a sign or list it in the MLS or put it on Facebook, whatever it might be. That is the authority, that's in your listing agreement. And then finally, under the advertising rule, we have a rule about blind ads, which says that a broker cannot advertise indicating the offer is being made by the principal only. So the ad has to indicate that it is the advertisement of a broker or firm. And it can't be confined to just contact information. So it can't have, just call me here at this number. It's got to have information on there identifying the brokerage firm and that the property is listed. So you've got to be careful about what's going in these ads. And in a little bit, I'll show you a few ads and we'll talk about what's wrong with them. I'll show you some actual ads that we've looked at here at the commission. Does anybody have questions so far? You guys interrupt me if you want. We're having a conversation. So,
hey Janet, I do have one, and you may hit on this
fire
later
away.
on. But when you say that the agent has to advertise the company for which the listing is, or if they're advertising any real estate services.
Right.
So if they're doing a TikTok video, do they have to have the company logo on the video? Because I've had some that do videos and they say, well, it's in my, I'm going to use the wrong terminology. It's in the link or the bio underneath the, so you actually got to go down and click on it. But if you're just looking at the video, it's not obvious.
I'm going to say standard. It's there. It's not written down anywhere, but I think that the common sense approach to that is it needs to be one click away from where you are. So if it's more than one click away, it's not good enough. But typically, if it's one click away, you're okay.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
That's good information.
Anybody else? Questions? Okay.
If we do have one more, if we have a team,
Yes.
the ABC team at Lantern Realty,
Yes.
the firm name still has to be on all advertisements and signage, correct?
The firm name has to be on all advertisements and signs. Now, the team may not be a licensed team. It may be a DBA of some kind. There are licensed teams and there are teams that don't operate in a way that requires them to be licensed. So if it's a DBA type of team, then they have got to have the firm name for which they're a DBA of. It has to be on there. If they are a licensed team, they can advertise in the name of the team, but they also should have their overarching firm listed as well, because both of those companies are really listing the property. And people need to remember that if they have a team that is licensed, that their listing agreements should name both firms as being listing agents, because they both need that authority to advertise.
Okay.
That comes from the listing agreement.
All right. Thank you for
So
that.
this is the kicker here for the BICs. In the BIC rule 110, the BIC is responsible for advertising at the firm. So it's responsible for all the advertising by brokers, whether they're provisional brokers or full brokers, any advertisements made in the name of the firm, which means a firm listing. Remember, the listings are owned by the firm and not the brokers. So every listing is owned by your firm. Every broker that advertises one of your listings, you're responsible for their ads. And that's a pretty big responsibility. So what does that mean? Does it mean you have to look at every single ad that every broker in your firm puts out? Maybe, if your brokers aren't being responsible in the way that they are advertising if they don't know that they need to look at permits and verify septic system capabilities before they advertise the number of bedrooms, if they aren't measuring square footage themselves and capable of measuring square footage by themselves, or if they're not hiring a professional to do their measuring for them. And I do mean a professional, not just, somebody who says they'll go measure. But if they're not doing those things, you may have to look at their advertisements. You certainly should look at the advertisements of any provisional brokers coming into your offices. They're new, they don't know what they're doing. It doesn't matter if they were licensed in another state or not, they still don't know what they're doing here. So that you should be looking at their advertisements. And you should have some guidelines for advertisements on social media. Our advice to brokers is not advertise properties on their personal social media pages. If they want to advertise, create, a commercial type of page where they're doing those ads, but they all advertise on personal pages anyway. So you really should have some standards set for them for what they have to do and what they have to include in their ads, and what their ads ought to look like, or, well, I'll show you an ad in a minute that probably you might not be happy if one of your brokers had put it out there, but you really ought to have a policy in place about your advertising and what your brokers are expected to do, because that's a question that we're going to ask you if we get a complaint about one of your full brokers advertisements. We're going to say, what's your policy about advertising? And if you can send me a written policy that you have and that you've disseminated to all of your brokers and gone over with them and expect them to follow, and now this one hasn't followed it, you're less likely to get caught up in the disciplinary, any disciplinary action that might move forward as a result of that. So have a written policy about your advertising. I think it's really important. Okay, so we'll have a little bit of fun here. I'll show you some ads. These are actual ads that we got complaints for. And you guys know we get complaints from all kinds of places. So sometimes it comes from typically our advertising complaints come from other brokers who see your ad, they don't like it, and they send it into us and tell us what's wrong with it. Sometimes there's something wrong with it, sometimes there's not. We get a lot of ads that come in, people telling us that it's a blind ad, and there's a broker's listing this property and not letting people know it's a broker. And that turns out often to not be the case, but sometimes it is. So we get all of these ads from different places. This one is an actual ad that we received. It's advertising this property is coming soon. First floor master, 4 bedrooms plus a bonus, great backyard, fantastic open floor plan. Showings begin Thursday, open house 2 to 4 on Saturday. Message me for more details. And that's what you have here. So you guys tell me, what do you think is wrong about this?
No firm identity.
There's no firm identity here. That's right. This was on a personal Facebook page, and there's no firm identity. And we ended up cautioning this broker about this kind of an advertisement because she failed to include her firm's name here. I don't know from the file, I couldn't tell if the BIC knew about this ad or not, but it definitely was one that didn't include the firm name. And I guess you could make the argument that you can see on the sign there that it's an Allen Tate listing, but that's not really helpful. So that wasn't going to cut it. I'm going to look at another one. This is an interesting, I'll have to make a confession about this one. This is an interesting sign. Tell me what you think about this sign. your neighborhood, realtor lives here, there's a phone number and an email address.
No firm identity.
There is no firm identity, and we did caution this broker about not having a firm identity. And then when I started looking at this, I asked the consumer protection officers in our office are the ones that handle all of their inquiry files, and they usually get these kind of complaints. And so they handle these, and this was one that we closed with a caution and instructed the broker to change the sign. And so I asked them for pictures of advertisements that they had been looking at, and this one came into me. And I started looking at it and thinking, well, what are they actually advertising here? They're not really advertising a piece of property. This is advertising the broker, I think. I'm not really sure. That's what it looks like to me. Maybe this is on the broker's own property. I'm not really sure. If this were on the broker's own property and they're just advertising themselves as a broker, I don't think we've got a violation here, because they're not advertising an actual property. If this is the sign for a property that happens to be in the same neighborhood, then yeah, it needs to have the firm name. So I was a little unsure myself as to how we got to the conclusion we did on this one. I'd have to look into it a little bit more.
So you don't interpret this sign as a solicitation for realtor services?
It might be for services, but it's not an advertisement for, it's not a listing being advertised here. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, maybe even for general brokerage services, it needs to contain the firm name. I don't think the ad specifies that it has to be for a property, or that I'd have to look at it a little bit more carefully. This one I would question.
Hey, Janet, this is Paula Seaver.
Okay, here's another one. This isn't a great picture.
Janet, you got a sec? Paula's got a question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hey, Janet, can you hear me?
I don't know. Talk louder. You got a
Hey.
good mouth. Come
I
on.
can't hear you. Hey, Paula.
Hey, I have a question. We highly encourage our agents on any advertising to always also add the equal housing opportunity logo.
Yes.
That's not a commission rule, is it? But it's highly encouraged. Is that correct?
That is not a commission rule. It might be something that the realtors want you to put on your advertising. I'm not sure, but it's not a commission rule. Certainly would be recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this particular sign is for what we a broker's number. And it doesn't advertise that it is that it is the sign of a broker. It doesn't have the firm name. It's definitely a blind ad.